What's up, guys? Brady Fugel here, coming at you with a review of the new Amorphis album Borderland, released last Friday, September 26th. 15 albums now from this band out of Finland, who seem to do a pretty good job of combining several different cornerstones of metal into kind of one sound. That'll be something that I touch on a few times in this review, but I will admit I'm not an expert as far as Amorphis' catalog goes. The one album by them that I really did get into when it released was their album Queen of Time in 2018. I really liked it then, but it wasn't until recently, going into this album, that I realized just how great of a record that is. Again, that record is just such like an eclectic mix of all these different sounds and styles, but the whole thing manages to have this really cohesive brightness to it, and even in its like heavy part. Aside from that record, the only really Amorphis album I've spent an extended period of time with was their album Am Universum. I was on an Is It That Bad episode for it where I gave some thoughts on it. I'll try and link that in the suggestion cards. But skimming through most of their catalog in preparation for this review, it does seem like the band has a signature blend of styles, a little bit of melodic death metal, a little bit of prog, some touches of power metal, or I guess what they call folk metal at times. And a lot of their music overall does maintain a lot of these triumphant and bright auras, which is something that I like. The only thing that becomes a problem as far as that goes for me is when entire albums feel like they're going for that specific mood the whole time. And that's something I would criticize regardless of what the mood is. In general, these records by any subgenre of metal or rock that are just really emotionally one-dimensional is always something that kind of takes away from the experience for me. It's just much more enjoyable hearing an album that has a more broad span of different moods and emotions. Even if it's like one specific one most of the time and you have a couple tracks that venture out, even that I think would be a good blend of sounds as opposed to just one mood the entire time. Unfortunately for this record, they do kind of fall into that trap of having just this album and all these songs feel really, really similar as far as the moods they're trying to convey and the auras and the vibes of these songs. This album is a record I would probably call pretty emotionally one-dimensional. That doesn't make it bad, and I will get into some specific examples of songs I really like, and also a few examples of songs where I think maybe some more shifts in mood or going for overall a more specific sound would have maybe worked well on specific tracks on here. I think a good instance of that would be the closer on here, Despair, which even in the title implies that this song should be wrought with despair. And even when you first hit play on this song, like you do have some somewhat somber melodies. The issue is they aren't really present throughout the rest of the song. You're kind of just teased with it a little bit. And don't get me wrong, this song isn't bad. I do find it very tuneful, and I love at the end when those massive choir vocals come in. That's so powerful. But just I listen to a song like this with the title Despair, with those somewhat darker melodies in the intro, and I just wish the band leaned into that a little bit more, because especially this being the closer, I think it would have been such an impactful way to end this album on a much darker note than all the songs that followed up. I also think the proggy track The Lantern would have been a cool track for the band to kind of experiment a bit more mood-wise, because while this track does feel like it leans a bit more into that prog influence, given that most of the song is in 7/4 timing, there's these like exotic breaks going into the verses that it almost sounds like maybe like a sitar is being played. I'm not fully sure. The lead guitars on this song definitely give it distinct flair in comparison to some of the other tracks on here, which will be an overarching compliment I have. But again, the song doesn't really shift the mood that much away from this specific mood that the album maintains the entire time. And I think this would have been one of the best tracks to do that with, given just how different it is structurally and in its timing. The song that probably departs the most mood-wise on here is track 2, Bones, which is probably my favorite song on here as a result. It's got this really impactful start that is just so like looming and towering. I like how the verses are a little bit calmer, yet they still have the growled vocals driving them. And this is just a really powerful song, and as a result, that probably makes it the most memorable track for me on here. But don't get it twisted, even despite my wishes that the album was a little bit more diverse in its mood, the band still does pull off these bright, triumphant feelings on multiple of these songs. The execution is still there for the majority of the time. Like, The Strange is a really cool track. It's got these chiming pianos over that heavier intro, I guess. The verses are filled with drama, and the song has this way of almost climbing the entire time with the constant key changes, which is something that stylistically might be a little bit hard to pull off. But the way the band executes it on here is borderline flawless, honestly. This song, as a result of its several different key changes, really does feel like it is constantly evolving. Track 3, Dancing Shadow, which is actually a very fitting title for this song just because of how it sounds. It does amplify some of that power metal influence a little bit more. Again, the intro is really bright and rich with those chiming melodies. There's those dramatic, emotional sounding pianos that add a lot of extra dimensions, I guess, to the song. And the chorus has this interesting contrast where the clean vocals and the growled vocals are kind of doing this call and response thing in a way. Fog to Fog has some great moments too. It's got this really empowering intro that I think is great. It transitions into some more kind of twinkling piano melodies. The vocals in this song, the clean vocals in particular, just absolutely soar, especially in that chorus. And then the solo on this track takes on more of like a synthy electronic flair that I think kind of separates it from other lead guitar parts on this record. There is this piano section that comes in after the chorus that sounds great. I just wish it was fleshed out a little bit more. It kind of ends up being cut short. And I will admit that listening throughout this entire album, the band does feel like they are kind of relying maybe a little bit too much on the pianos in particular. They just end up becoming really prevalent in multiple of these songs in a row, which might make it a little bit formulaic at times. Same thing with the idea of key changes, although they are used impeccably in a song like The Strange. When they are used multiple times throughout this record, it does make the record sound a little bit redundant at times. So as you can see, I do have some small criticisms, but overall this is still a solid record. The one song that doesn't really do it for me on here is actually the title track, which is the second to last song. It has a decent build-up, but overall, especially at this point in the album, this is the track that feels like it's just the most filler-esque in a sense that it has a lot of prior ideas at that point in the record that are used again. Maybe the biggest thing that takes away from me with this album is listening to it back to back with, for me in particular, Queen of Time. And I'm sure with a band like Amorphis that has 15 albums out and has been around for so long, several different fans have multiple different albums by them that they would call their favorites. For me, from what I've heard, it's Queen of Time. But if you're a fan of this band, maybe listen back to back this record with your favorite Amorphis record. Maybe you'll see kind of what I'm coming from in a sense that overall, this album does feel a little bit undercooked, maybe slightly uninspired. From what I have heard, it definitely seems like one of the band's more streamlined releases with the prog dialed back a bit. The clean vocals on here are way more prevalent and present than the harsh vocals. On that note, though, I will say that the clean vocals along with the lead guitars are the two best aspects about this album, especially production-wise. Production-wise, the clean vocals absolutely soar. They sound so smooth and clean, and they're just so pleasant to listen to. So yeah, I have to give a lot of credit to frontman Tommy Joutsen for executing these clean vocals so well, in addition to them being produced so well. He sings so confidently on this record. His vocals sound really, really smooth and fluid, like I just said. And the lead guitar also does a good job of punching through a lot of these songs and spicing them up at times. As far as closing thoughts, The Circle, the intro track, is okay. I don't dislike it, but it doesn't really feel like an opener to me. It's an overall more melodic, mid-tempo type song that just doesn't really bring much of an entrance. If it were me, I would have put this track maybe in the middle of the record and started the album off with Bones, which is the most powerful song on here to me. That just would have been, to me, a bit more of a commanding statement, I guess would be the best way of putting it, which is, to me, the best way to start an album. And I do maybe wish that the growls and the harsh vocals were used a little bit more alongside the cleans, because the growls on here also sound really good. And I think maybe pushing the heaviness a little bit more maybe would have given this album a bit more of a sense of urgency. Yeah, overall, not a bad record by any means. A record that I probably would still call good overall. But if I were to guess, and if I were to listen to all 15 now of Amorphis' records, the vibe I get from this one is non-essential release. Whereas, I don't know, 10, 15 years from now, if you're introducing someone to Amorphis, this probably wouldn't be one of the records that you would show them. Again, any hardcore fans of this band, please comment below if you agree. I obviously don't have a whole lot to work off of because I don't know all of their catalog, but that's kind of just the vibe I get. So yeah, let me know. But for now, I'm going to score this album a 21 out of 30. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to hit subscribe for more rock and metal-related content. Also check the description for all my links, including one to my original music. Please comment down below what you think of this record. And yeah, until next time, thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.